Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? Folks, today is Friday, November 15, 2024, and coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, streaming live on the Black Star Network. The next 2 hours, we'll pay tribute to one of the greatest artists America has ever seen. Quincy Jones, who passed away last week at the age of 91, left a mark that is simply unmatched. Not just a musician, but a composer. I mean, movies and televisions, you name it, he's done it all. And we'll pay tribute to an enormous life. The man everyone called Q. We'll remember him right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah.
years ago, this photo here was taken at Oprah's Legends Ball in Santa Barbara, California. This, of course, was where I saw Quincy on the red carpet, and we took this photo. It was always great to see him. He always had a great smile, always had great stories to tell. Quincy Jones passed away on last Monday at the age of 91. And of course, with the election taking place, there were so many things that were going on. We normally that day would pay tribute, so we decided to hold off and decided to focus on that today. Again, an extraordinary man who led an extraordinary life. I said this the other day, and I meant every word. Quincy Jones may have died at the age of 91, but this is somebody who I dare say, I always say, packed 200 years of life into 91 years. When you look at the things that he did, when you look at when he had an aneurysm, almost died, and he had a whole second life, then a third life, then a fourth life. We can go on and on and on, the type of life that he led. We now know that Quincy passed away from pancreatic cancer. Don't know how long how long he was diagnosed with it. But again, folks, remember, so much about him. When you think about his story, not only people talk about the Grammys, they talk about, of course, working with Michael Jackson, but we talk about Frank Sinatra. We talk about what he did in movies and television, and how he had just this enormous impact on so many aspects of music. We'll be getting into that over the next couple of hours. And so right now, I want to bring in Michael Bearden. Michael Bearden, of course, musician, director, you name it, can do all of that. And there's so much we could talk about it. So Michael, let's start off with you, because again, when we talk about Quincy Jones, we talk about his influence. I don't know of anyone in the second half of the 20th century and then, of course, in the 21st century, whose impact can be close to Quincy. I would probably say, if you had two legendary figures, it would be Quincy Jones and Duke Ellington. Michael?
Yes, sir.
Again, as I said, when you think about, again, the role that he played, the two legendary figures I will compare Quincy Jones, the person I would compare Quincy Jones to would be a Duke Ellington. So what Duke Ellington did in the first half of the 20th century, I think Quincy Jones in the second half of the 20th century and the 21st century.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that. And also, Quincy tells the story that Duke kind of tasked him with, being the person to decategorize music, if you will. So Duke was definitely a fan of Quincy and saw the future in him. So yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that statement.
Again, his impact. I think that it's important for people to understand that it just crossed so many areas. And there was no one genre, frankly, where you can actually talk about Quincy Jones.
No, that's absolutely right, and that's what he was about. He was a blueprint for many. I don't claim to be the only one, but he was definitely the blueprint for me, being, from the South Side of Chicago, as he was, as I am. Then he moved to New York. I moved to New York. He moved to L.A. I moved to L.A. But in his early career, he had, so many hits, not only just his jazz things, but, It's My Party and I'll Cry If I Want to, Leslie Gore. Like, he was the producer of that song. And so I remember having a conversation with him one time, because after he started finding success in the pop genre and other genres, people that he came up with, and, I won't name names, but people were calling him a sellout and all these kind of things. So I was talking to him about that because, a lot of my early part of my career was jazz, as my friend Gerald Albright could tell you. And so I was talking to him one day about that and people calling me a sellout and all that kind of thing. And he told me, he said, you know what you tell them? And I said, what's that, Q? He said, well, you tell them you want to sell out every record in the bin. And that was his thing about that.
So folks were calling Quincy Jones a sellout because he wasn't solely focused on jazz, as opposed to. But here was somebody who was a music composer, a music producer, and so I saw a clip. I was looking earlier. I saw a clip where he was being interviewed in Brazil, and he started naming all these Brazilian musicians that he loved. When you're a music connoisseur or Renaissance person, you're not focused on one genre or one part of the country. You literally understand that music is worldwide.
No, absolutely right. And from where we grew up, especially in Chicago, back when I'm sure when Quincy was growing up, but when I grew up too, music wasn't as segregated on the radio as it become. So, when I was a kid, I was listening to James Brown, Jackson 5, Creedence Clearwater Revival, Jim Croce, Led Zeppelin, like all these things, Ohio Players, like all these things just blended together. We didn't know that you weren't supposed to like a certain type of music. So when it came to Quincy, he was a world traveler. So he studied with Nadia Boulanger. And so, the famous composer and who taught a lot of composers. So when he was in Paris, he was, exposed to all kinds of music. And when you're a world traveler as a musician, you hang with the musicians in the culture. And so you learn the culture and you absorb all the music that's being played around the world. So you don't just think in a homogenous type of way. You think globally, and in a stew. What am I trying to say? Just a palette of everything that you really want to express musically, and so it should not be one thing. And so when anybody expressed that he was a sellout or anything like that, it just showed more about them than it did about Quincy.
One of the things that we got to show a little bit later, when he did the History Makers interview, it was quite interesting, Michael. He talked about, frankly, his dad being a numbers runner, and they were run out of Chicago by the folks, and they were, let's just say, involved in some underhand activities in Seattle. And then they would arrive at a place, and he actually saw this trumpet and fell in love with it, and that's what changed his whole perspective when it came to choosing not to be a street criminal and then going into music.
Yeah, I read that in his book, his autobiography, and he talked about that a lot in interviews, as you say. And back then, especially for Quincy, on the south side of Chicago, it was gangs. It was that way when I was growing up. So, a lot of times the kids just got involved in that activity, and he just felt that he didn't want to do that anymore. And so for him to just see the trumpet and just take to it was a blessing for all of us, for the world, because had he gone down the gang route, there would not be a Quincy Jones.
What was it like to sit and talk to him about music? It had to feel as if you were having a conversation with Dr. King and the Pope about religion.
Yeah, that's such a great question. As I said earlier, I don't claim to be the only one to have access to him. He was a mentor to many of us, so many musicians, and he was so generous with his time and his wisdom. So to sit with him in his house and just have him, you could ask him any question and he would answer it, and just to have him. I remember one time I was doing a show with him in Washington, D.C. We were doing a thing at the Kennedy Center. It was for jazz. I think it was the first time jazz had been, primetime televised in 30 years or something like that. And it was a big concert with all these jazz stars. Natalie Cole was on it. And the orchestra was a big, who's who of jazz in there. And I was fortunate enough to be in the orchestra. And we were riding in the van going to somewhere, I think, like the vice president's house or something like that. And I hear him and Percy Heath and all these, the older school cats talking. And Quincy was just like, yeah, you remember we went to this place down the street right here? Yeah, you, me, and Bird, we were going over there, and I'm just sitting next to him like, you talking about Charlie Parker, Bird? Like he was just a walking history book of everything. And he was saying it matter of factly because that was his life. That's who he grew up around. That's who he came up with, and yeah, you, me, and Miles went over. We ate at this place over here. Then we went to this club. Like it was. It was like probably sitting and talking. I didn't get the chance, but talking to Dr. King about things. I did have a friendship with Harry Belafonte, so it was like that. It was like talking to historians, people who lived this and could tell you verbatim what happened.
Flat out, and I just think that again, because he wasn't in. Well, actually, I'll rephrase that. What's interesting is that Quincy Jones was in front of the camera and behind the microphone. He did both, and so he wasn't a singer. But when you think about artists and producers, Quincy was like in his whole separate category where he was as an even bigger star than, frankly, a lot of the folks he was producing.
No, that's right, and I think it was just because his personality was so big and so giving and so generous. His light just shined all the way through that. Like he was just confident when he came in the room and not trying to be so. That's just how he was. And so people just were attracted to him in that manner. And he was just as famous, if not more famous, than the artists that he produced and worked with. Yes.
A lot of things you can remember in those conversations. What's that one thing that stands out?
Oh, wow. I remember, so there's so many, Roland. But I remember one time I did the ASCAP awards, and they were honoring Quincy, and I was the music director for the show, and I, put together his music and did this whole thing. And so afterwards, I sat with him, and Sidney Poitier was there sitting with him. And I sat with Q, and I asked him, how was it? And he said, it brought me to tears. And I said, and I'm so self-deprecating sometimes. I was like, it was that bad? He said, no, it was that beautiful. And we sat down, and we just talked for a while. And, Mr. Poitier left, and it was just me and Quincy, and everybody was coming around him. And I would, because I'm from Chicago and I revered him so much, I would still talking to him as one of my heroes, which he was and still is. And, I was praising him and doing all these things. And he said, boy, stop all of that. And I was like, what do you mean, Q? He said, you have now become the people that you look up to. So now you have to pour into others what, you've got from me and others that you like, and continue the cycle that way. And that's the thing that I'll remember. I'll never forget that, because in one breath, he knew who he was, and he knew that I revered him and all that. But he also knew that once you get to a certain level, like I was the music director for something that I just did for him, and I was able to get that knowledge and wisdom through things that he's done in his career. And his thing was like, that's great. Now it's time for you to pay it forward. So that's one of the many things that I'll absolutely remember from Q.
All right, Michael Beard, man, always appreciate you sharing your thoughts and reflections with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Roland. I love you, man. So
I appreciate it, bro. Thanks a lot. Folks, going to go to a break. We come back. We're going to chat with saxophonist Gerald Albright to share his thoughts and reflections about the late, great Quincy Jones, right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Now that Roland Martin is willing to give me the blueprint, hey, Cyrus, I need to go to Tyler Perry and get another blueprint because I need some green money. The only way I can do what I'm doing, I need to make some money. So you'll see me working with Roland. Matter of fact, it's the Roland Martin and Cheryl Underwood show. Well, should it be the Cheryl Underwood show and the Roland Martin show? Well, whatever show it's going to be, it's going to be good.
Folks, Quincy Jones, 91 years old. When you look at the folks who this man worked with, I mean, it is a shocking and stunning. You're talking about Lionel Hampton, Dizzy Gillespie, Frank Sinatra, Count Basie. Then you go, director Sidney Lumet. When you talk about playing in the band behind Elvis Presley. Also, when you look at Michael Jackson, when you look at, when you just start just naming all of the folks. I mean, absolutely, from the age of 20 till he passed away, there was no one who he, seemingly didn't seem to work with. And so we are paying tribute to him tonight on the Black Star Network. Joining us right now is saxophonist Gerald Albright. Glad to have you on the show. And I don't say this lightly. When Michael Bearden was just talking, he was talking about seeing Quincy in a conversation with Sidney Poitier. And when I think about the greats, when I think about, being in rooms with certain people, I mean, when you saw Harry Belafonte, when you saw Sidney Poitier, when you saw Quincy Jones, I mean, you did approach them with reverence because they not only American royalty, but they're absolutely black royalty.
Absolutely. But at the same time, the irony of that, Roland, and by the way, happy belated birthday, my frat brother.
Appreciate it.
The irony behind that is that he was just Quincy. Even though he was royalty, both musically and an ambassador for the United States, you forget, what he really was because he was so down to earth and so approachable. And that's what I loved about him. I kind of called him my industry dad, because you could talk to him at any time. If you called him, he'll answer the phone. He was that guy, and I appreciate him, and I wholeheartedly miss him.
I said this to Michael as well. I mean, the man's musical knowledge was just utterly ridiculous.
Absolutely. There was a time in my career back in, I was going to say the late 80s, where I was recording the Back on the Block album with him, and I prefaced that recording session by saying, "Hey, Q, when we take a break, I'd like to go into the lobby of the recording studio and just talk to you about career-oriented stuff." And he said, "Absolutely, man." And we sat on the couch, and this was the point in my career where I wasn't really happy with the things that were happening in my career, and I wanted to figure out the best way to optimize that. And he gave me some great golden nuggets in terms of what to do and what not to do in the recording industry, some things that I use to this day. And to have somebody take the time to sit down with you a man that's at work as a producer and songwriter. It just meant so much to me, and I'm going to miss those times that I talked to him.
And when you talk about those things, and again, to have a conversation with somebody who not only is an artist himself, but also that musical knowledge journey is just ridiculous. Again, starting at the age of 20, and again, when you start saying, okay, wait a minute, Count Basie, Lionel Hampton, and you just start going down all of these artists and band leaders or whatever. People say this, but it's a little hard to say, I think I can get one over on Quincy, because he did see and hear it all.
Yes, absolutely. Quincy always had the finger on the pulse. I tell the story all the time that me and my wife went to a concert in the late 80s at the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles. And there was a couple of groups performing, and it was intermission time. The lights came on, and I discovered that 3 rows down from me, Quincy Jones was sitting. And I nudged my wife and I said, hey, that's Quincy Jones. And she said, go say hi to him. I'm like, I'm not going to go and, I don't want to bug Quincy, Finally, long story short, I got enough nerve to go and say hi to Quincy, and I kind of tapped him on the shoulder. I said, Mr. Jones, and he's like, hey, Gerald Albright. He already knew me, and to the point of, hey, man, I like that record on your new album, which at the time was my very first album as a recording artist, Just Between Us. It was a song called King Boulevard that I dedicated to Martin Luther King Jr. And he actually sung the melody in real time at me, which lets me know, man. Yeah, that messed me up. I was cool for the whole night, man.
I'm sure you're sitting there going, hold on, wait a minute, hold up. Here, I got a new album, and Quincy, not only has he heard it, but he's singing it back to me. But that shows you this dude listened to it all. He loved music.
He truly did, and all styles of music. But as you said so eloquently, Roland, his history, starting from age 20, I mean, he's done every genre of music known to man, unimaginable. And he was quite the chameleon. He was great at all of it. And again, for him to sit there and actually sing the melody to one of my songs, man, that's the greatest compliment. I mean, it doesn't get better than that, Roland,
Well, and I think that, and when I talk about, again, appreciation of the craft, what I often say to people is that really what sets apart greats from others, where they aren't just sort of just locked into their own little space. They are listening and seeing and studying and experimenting and going all over and gaining and gaining inspiration from so many different sounds. And I just think that I always joke with people all the time because they go, man, like you listen to all this stuff. I said, but you don't understand. I said, if it sounds interesting and appealing, I want to hear more of it. We don't have to be so locked into just this one style, this one genre. You got to go broad and beyond. And that was Quincy, which made him the one person you wanted on speed dial.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he inspired me so much in my own personal production and songwriting. I myself, due to Quincy, listen to different genres of music to help inspire what I'm doing. And you never know what's going to really hit home and really inspire you in a way to make a hit record. So you got to listen to everything. And he was one of those guys that just really pushed that point. You have to be broad in terms of your approach to the music because it's powerful and it's vast. And so I thank Quincy wholeheartedly for that.
There's so many things that he did. Again, when you look at 79 Grammy nominations, winning 28, the record was broken by Beyonce. But it's not really even just the Grammy Awards. I just think how Quincy Jones was received across the world.
Yes. He was a true ambassador. In a non-musical sense, the one talent that he had was making everybody around him comfortable. you couldn't say no to Quincy. Again, he's like an industry dad. When he called you, you would drop everything and go and do whatever he asked you to do. He just had those type of relationships, but he made you feel like you were part of his family. And whenever he did something huge. I remember we went and did the Montreux Jazz Festival in Montreux, Switzerland some years ago, and it was Quincy Jones night, and we had a big band and a who's who. I can't give you the list of the who's who that was on that stage, but I was blessed to be there myself. And as I looked around, I'm like, wow, this guy is truly loved. And, as he was getting to the work of making that show what it needed to be, he was still like dad showing up. He just showing up at home, and, we're playing in his living room. It was that type of vibe. It was very comfortable. And I'm going to miss those moments with him, man. But I'm glad I have the moments that I have to remember, between he and I.
Indeed, indeed. Gerald Albright, we certainly appreciate it, Fred. Keep up the great work.
06, you're very welcome, man. See you soon.
All right, absolutely. Folks, as I said, Quincy Jones sat down for an interview that was taped here in Washington, D.C., but by the history makers, and it was great to be there. I had an opportunity to witness this conversation, and in that conversation, there were a lot of things that were talked about. But one of the things he talked about was moving to Washington State, moving to Seattle. And that was a significant part of his life. This is Quincy Jones being interviewed by the late Gwen Ifill here in the nation's capital for the History Makers conversation.
After all these decades, 6 decades almost of doing this.
It's pitiful.
It is. It's not pitiful. It's fabulous.
But Herbie and I have one thing, though, and we say we don't play that Mr. Hancock, Mr. Jones stuff.
Can I call you Q?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So tell me, Q, what drives you?
Life and love.
In which order?
Well, love, naturally.
But there was nothing in your childhood to suggest that you would be doing what you're doing today. In fact, there were so many things in your childhood which argued against this.
Absolutely. We wanted to be the great gangsters because that's what Chicago was best at. Chicago, they groomed the best gangsters, black, white, green, or blue, whatever. Oh, Giacomo Capone. And my father, ironically, was a master carpenter, and he worked for the Jones Boys. You talk about the OGs, these were the triple OGs. Smart, beautiful, organized, structured, elegant guys. And I remember the biggest whipping I ever had was when I was at a birthday party when I was 7, and Eddie Jones, the boss of the gangsters, his daughter Harriet was 5 years old. She asked me to cut her hair a little bit, and I cut all of it off.
But you spent most of your time, your real growing up time in Seattle, which people do not think of naturally as being a wellspring of American jazz.
It was about half and half. I spent 10 years in Chicago. We left right after the Jones Boys were politely asked to go to Mexico. My daddy came by the barber shop and picked my brother and I up and said, no, you don't have time to go home and get your toys. We're getting straight on the Trailway bus. And we went to the Northwest because he was a Jones, but he wasn't a gangster. But that's all we saw. That's all we want, all we knew. And that's what we wanted to be. My stepbrother was pitiful. He was a serious gangster. But, and then we went to this unclaimed territory in Bremerton, Washington, the Bremerton shipyards. I said, man, we're going to waste this place. Because, you know, we're 11 years old or 10 years old, and we had seen all these professional gangsters working all this time. I said, we could tear this place up because they don't know what's going on. I remember our first big job, you want to call it. Clarence Abrams likes to call them businessmen, please. Was we stole a carton of honey, bottles of honey, and went out in the woods and drank all that honey, and I never touched honey again for 20 years.
Tell me about lemon meringue pie and juke joints.
Right across the street from my house was the Army camp with the barbed wire, 50 caliber machine guns, and there was a big armory next door that was our recreation hall for all of the whole community. And we had inside tracks on everything, you know. I'm telling you, we got our stuff together. And we heard that there was some lemon meringue pies being shipped in on Monday, and some chocolate and vanilla ice cream, so we were ready on arrival. And we broke in there and ate as much as we could, and we had pie fights. And I went and broke open the superintendent's office and saw a little spinning piano over in the corner, and we're getting ready to close the door because it really didn't look valuable to me. You know, I didn't know people played then. And somebody said, "Fool, go back." God's whisper said, "Go back in that room now." And I went back in there, and I slowly went over to that piano and touched it with my fingers. And every cell in my body said, "This is what you do the rest of your life." And that one move, you know, changed everything in my whole life, you know.
Folks, fantastic conversation. We'll share more of that when we come back. Going to a break right now. We come back, we'll chat with singer Howard Hewitt about the late, great Quincy Jones. Right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
How you doing? My name is Mark Carey, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Deep into it, like pasteurized milk without the 2%. We getting deep. You want to turn that shit off? We're doing an interview, motherfucker.
Folks, to understand Quincy Jones and how much he was involved with, I think about this interview that he did in 2007. He was asked a question, would he work with Michael Jackson again? He said, "Man, please, we already did that. I have talked to him about working with him again, but I've got too much to do. I've got 900 projects. I'm 74 years old." Quincy Jones was doing music, he was doing movies, he was doing television shows, he was doing all sorts of things. Folks, just think what I just told you. This was when he was 74 years old. He lives another 17 years. And he was still doing things up until the last few months of his life. Howard Hewitt joins us right now. And Howard, glad to have you here, man. I just think, again, the output of this man is just sick.
Man, Quincy, you can't be sad about Quincy, today, because Quincy lived the life that every musician wants to live. You know what I'm saying? Every musician, every wannabe producer, every vocalist, the whole thing. When I first met Quincy, man, I was kind of branching off because I got in with the group. I got in with Shalimar. And I was kind of, and I worked with Leon Silvers, you know, and checked him out as a producer, the way that he did his thing. And I worked with, then I kind of branched out. I started working with Stanley Clarke, started working with George Duke, of course. And then my big brother, James Ingram. I met James. James and I we're from the same hometown, from Akron, Ohio. So James was always like, I met James when I was 15. So when he came to L.A., a couple years later, I went to L.A., then we connected, and we stayed connected and stuff. And then he brought me into the whole situation because he wrote a song called PYT, right? And it got placed on the Thriller album. And so that he wanted me to come in and work with him on the backgrounds. So that's when I first met Quincy. And like, man, working with Quincy, man, was like going to school. It was like going into the classroom. The professors in there, he would come up, he and Bruce Wadeen would sit there. He would, you know, bring out his briefcase and his folder. And man, it was like going to school. And after that, we worked on a bunch of stuff. We worked on Barbra Streisand project. We worked on Donna Summer, Ernie Watts' album, about a bunch of stuff through the years. But it was always like going to school when I go in the studio with Quincy. We just have fun, and it was amazing. It was amazing.
You talked about that partnership with James Ingram. Of course, so many hits came out of that relationship. In fact, when that History Makers conversation took place, was recorded here in D.C., James Ingram actually performed on that broadcast. That was actually the first time I got a chance to meet James Ingram that night. And you talk about that vast musical knowledge. I mean, it was essential. I would just say, if you were around Quincy Jones working on music, that was like going to college every single day. Every day. You know, and it was beautiful. It was like, and his whole, you know, because as a producer, you have to develop like a doctor, you know, bedside manner, you know, because you got to be able to bring the best out of your artist. You know, you got to make that artist comfortable. You got to make you have to know and seem like you know and know that you know what you're doing. You know, as an artist, if I'm sitting there and with a producer and the producer doesn't really know what he's doing, that doesn't make me, you know, that comfortable as an artist. Then we're both in there, you know, looking around and figuring out which way we're gonna go. Now he let an artist be an artist, that's for sure. You know what I'm saying? It's not like he just controlled the whole situation, but you know, he did make it comfortable enough. He made it comfortable enough for you to put your best foot forward, but he also had everything. You knew that he had everything under control. Well, I love the story he tells of Michael Jackson telling him to take the violins off the beginning of the song. Quincy was like, hell no. Yeah, I know. He's like, you don't tell me what to do. Exactly. And as from that story, you realize that's one of the most identifiable parts of that song. And so, like, as a producer, he knows what he's doing. He knew what he was doing. And you had the confidence, you had full confidence in that when you went into the studio with him. Well, I think what also people need to learn, you have amazing artists, Michael Jackson or Prince, who are musical geniuses, but you can't also deny that there's a musical genius of the producer as well. You can't deny it. Say that again, I'm sorry. I said that the artists, we talk about a Michael Jackson or Prince and how they're musical geniuses, but you also can't deny the musical genius of a producer like a Quincy Jones. Oh, definitely. It's like I said, Quincy, when he would come in, he would have everything worked out, and he knew how to balance the whole situation between what he had worked out and leave room for spontaneity for the artist to put their identifiable situation on it as well.
but spontaneity is very important in the studio as well, and he realized that. So, you know, and as a producer, you have to know, you have to have a good balance between the two, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you think about just so many of the different artists, does it also impress you that he was able just to move from not only decades, but genres, but also musical tastes and styles from 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, 2020. I mean, he was like a chameleon of music.
I mean, he brought over he went over all genres of music. You know what I'm saying? And like I worked on the back on the block project with him as well, and to see him go from, you know, the Patti Austin to Big Daddy Kane to, you know, jumping back into Ray Charles and Shaka, and I mean he jumped there. It was amazing watching him work on that project. Was really an amazing process that he went through.
Share a little bit more about that, because most people don't understand how albums come together. It's not like everybody is operating in the same space in the same time. And so how much time did you spend with him?
We spent on the back on the black album. It was like I went in and did. We worked on. I worked on about maybe 3 or 4 tracks on that album with him, and me and James, and a couple other people. Then he had some of the chorus type of situation where you had a bunch of people, you know, a bunch of artists that were like a choir type of situation, you know, and everything. When you think about a project, especially a project like that, to keep everything, it's a chore to keep everything in order. You know what I mean? Because he was going back and forth from one genre of music to the other, from one artist to the other. So, you know, it was like he had, as a producer, he had to keep everything in order. You know what I'm saying? So there wouldn't be total, complete, just chaos. You know, because in a production like that, it's easy to fall into a bunch of chaos, because, you know, everybody's going to have an opinion about that. Everybody's going to have an opinion about this. There's going to be, you know, this type of thing, that type. So as the producer, you're the one that has to be able to listen, but then keep everything on track as well, so that you stay on the schedule that you set for the completion of the album. You got to keep everything on track. So that was like, man, that in itself, and a big part of Quincy's team was Bruce Swedien, the engineer, and man, with Quincy's guidance and Bruce's ear, and Quincy's ear along with Bruce's ear, and keeping everything like pinpointed as far as the sound that you want, the type of vocals that you want in there, what you want to project as far as, you know, the mood of a song. And back and the Back on the Black album, there were so many different moods that were happening. So to keep all that stuff, man, intact, and keep it on track, and keep it, man, it was the times on the tracks that I worked on. I forget what tracks it was. Back on the Block, and I forget the name of it. So long ago. But man, to keep everything on track, man, that was a feat all in itself.
Did you ever, watching the process, wonder how he gonna pull all this together?
You know, it's like, but you might say that, but then you look up there and you see, oh, this is Quincy Jones. You know what I'm saying? It's like then all speculation, all questions, and everything go out the window, because you know he's going to pull off. Before we did that project, like I said, we had worked on a bunch of other stuff before that, and by that time, I had really gotten to know his style, and that's what my whole thing was at the time. Like I said, I started working with when I first came into the business, into the recording business. Anyway, I was working with Leon Silvers. So Leon and Quincy, even though Leon is prolific in his own and amazing in his own right, they were two completely different ways of producing. Sometimes I would look at Leon and say, and something that we were working on, and how are you gonna pull this off? Is he gonna pull this off? But with Quincy, you ask that you might have a shot in your head with that thought, but then that goes out the window, immediately when you look up there and you see this is Quincy Jones. So you know what the deal is. You know it's going to be cold-blooded.
Indeed. Howard, always glad to see you and chat with you.
Good to see you too.
Quincy Jones was a unique brother, and in the beauty of music, it will always be with us, even when folks move on to become ancestors.
Yeah, man, he was a mentor, like he was for probably thousands and thousands of other artists and musicians through the years. Man, he will be missed, but like I said, you cannot be mad. You can't be sad because he lived the life.
Oh, yeah. I said at the top of the show, I said, Quincy Jones dies at 91. He packed 200 years of life into 91 years.
And that's what he used to tell me, man. He said, Howie, he said, man, I've been talking to some doctors in Stockholm, man. I'm going to freeze this stuff. I ain't going to get old, And we sat. I remember one time I saw him out, man, and we just sat and we talked, and he talked about that whole what do they call it, cryogenics?
Yeah, cryogenics.
Yeah, and all that kind of stuff. I said, Q, man, come on, man. He said, no, baby boy, I'm good. I'm living forever. You know what I'm saying? He was an amazing, amazing cat, and we will miss him, but we ain't crying for him right now.
Oh no.
I send a lot of love out to the family. That's one thing that he was heavy on, was his girls and his son and the kids. And I send my thoughts and my prayers, and God bless all of them. And man, thank you for letting me come on here and just talk about my man for a minute, man. It's very special.
I think the only thing that he loved I would probably say number 3 to music and his family was women, which produced his family. So
well, that was one of the main reasons for the cryogenic situation. and again, Roland, I ain't mad at him, boy, because he had some fine women on his arm.
That was Q.
Oh man, that was Q. And like, if you look at, I would suggest to everybody to watch that Netflix special.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's amazing.
Yep.
It's amazing, and it goes all the way back. To the beginning of
the documentary done on him. I tell you, if there's one thing, it still drives me crazy. When I was at TV One, and you talk about Quincy being approachable, because I would often call him at his house, and we would chat. Not long chats, we would chat. And he actually agreed to do a sit-down interview. And something happened, and the folks at TV One, our production people, put it off, and it never made it happen. That pissed me off. To this day, it pisses me off. Which is one of the reasons why I tell people, by me owning and controlling it now, I ain't got nobody who can tell me, no, you can't go do it. So I still hate the fact, and I'm talking about Quincy, he said, yes, we were going to do it at his house. This was prior to the documentary and everything. And man, I'm still sitting here. Matter of fact, I may try to find an email to cuss out the person who said no, because we never got a chance to do that conversation. So,
man, we did. I did, not to cut you off, but I did an interview one time over in England, over in the UK, right? And we were talking about a lot of different stuff. People I work with talked about Quincy. I worked on a Shaka project also, and like I said something, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was misconstrued. Once by the time it came out in print, this cat was saying Howard says this and that about Quincy, blah 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 blah, right? And I read it when I was on a plane I was coming back home from the UK. And man, as soon as I got off the plane, because my flight got in like early afternoon, early morning, whatever. And as soon as I got off the plane, I went to Westlake Studios and took the article there, and I said, Q, I did not say this. I didn't say this. This is blah 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 blah. And man, and that's one of the big lessons that he taught me. That he told me right then. He taught me that. He said, Howard, you have to learn how to guide the interview that you're doing. You don't let people guide you in the interview. You figure out how to guide that interview the way that with the information that you want to put out, that you want to include in that article or radio interview or whatever it would be. And that was one of the because that was early in my career. Mm-hmm. So I'm still feeling my way somewhat around interviews and stuff. And a lot of times, man, you be in an interview, man, and somebody says something and you go off on a whole nother situation that you shouldn't go off on. And then they take it and then they got so that was one of the mentoring situations that was very, very dear to me when he told me that.
Absolutely. Well, Howard, we appreciate it, man. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you, man. God bless.
Appreciate it. Folks, Quincy Jones talked about in that History Makers interview how music was his escape. Here is that conversation.
Music for you was an escape. It was your form of rebellion.
But music was more than an escape. It was a mother. I started out in Seattle when you had to play a white tennis club dinner with white cardigan jackets and played dance music and so forth. Then we changed our uniforms and go to the black clubs, the Rocking Chair, and Washington Educational and Social Club. What a joke. And the proprietor was Reverend Silas Groves. Please, bring your own bottles, play for strippers, and we do comedy acts, man. We steal all the comics who come through there. We steal all the material at 17 and do all these nasty jokes. And we weren't supposed to be in clubs. I was 13,
Yeah.
So we pretended like we were smoking and everything so we could get in the clubs. And I was just lucky that the teachers didn't. I had one teacher, Parker Cook, that saved my life because he said, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Because I didn't get finished playing until 5:30 in the morning. And I could. Garfield High School is right across the street, that's where Jimi Hendrix went to. And I couldn't get there till 11 sometimes, but he supported me, though. In fact, I thought I saw him up there in one of those joints a couple of times.
Did it ever occur to you that you were in the middle of something revolutionary?
No way. We were just, Ray Charles came to town, I was 14. I couldn't believe him, He came in and he was 16 or 17, but he was like 100 years older than me because I was still staying at home with 8 kids, and 2 parents and his raggedy stepmother. And he had 2 suits, his own record player, 2 girlfriends, everything. I couldn't believe it, and I was around him all. I didn't do it like Lorenz Tate did. I wasn't like that at all. And I wrote the dialogue for that, but I wasn't like that at all. In movies, they have to make up stuff, This little cat was loud and cocky and talked. I never talked at all when I was little. I sat up and listened because I was around guys who knew what they were talking about, like Basie and Clark Terry. And there's one thing that Ray and I used to say every day to keep from being affected by the climate in this country at that time, and that not one drop of my self-worth depends on your acceptance of me. Because you never wanted an... You never wanted an external force to decide what your identity was about. And we were really, 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 really cognizant of that. And we stuck to it because Ray was strong, boy. He says, I'm going to have 3 of my own planes in 20 years. 1968, he had 3 planes. And Ray he knew how to deal with money, everything. Because in the beginning, we didn't think about money or fame. We didn't, like today, the bling bling, forget that.
There was no money.
There was no bling bling. The biggest joke on Broadway when we were out there starving to death was in front of the Brill Building was you'd see somebody being held by their ankles out of a 33-story window and the overcoat hanging all over his head. And they say, what's that going on up there? They say, that's Jackie Wilson renegotiating his contract. All of the booking agencies, the nightclubs, record company, everything were all owned by the gangsters. Everything, the Copacabana, the Chez Paris, Horseface, Liquor Bowl, and Fish and stuff. And boy, between them, Chicago and Sinatra, I met all of them.
Tell us the story of the first time you met Charlie Parker.
Oh, I almost had a heart attack. And even worse, so it was Bird was never aware that anybody was around because he was, unfortunately, what happened, he came from Jay McShann's band, Dizzy came from Cab Calloway's band, and they had this new idea, but they did not want to be entertainers anymore. They didn't want to have to roll their eyes or dance or entertain and dance for anybody anymore. Louis had to do it, and I'll defend Louis to death. Louis did what he had to do. If it wasn't for Louis, we wouldn't be here. Everybody did what they did, and it's a sociological music. That's what I try to tell my little brothers all the time, man. You can't say to throw jazz and blues away just for hip-hop, because it's all part of millions of people's sociological experience, a terrible one. And for the 50s and 60s, black artists got wasted. I'm telling you, you cannot believe what I'd record with Laverne Baker. They'd send an arrangement over to the other side of town. George Gibbs would copy it. Fats Domino would do his tune. Pat Boone would take it on the other side, and it was split. The markets were split in the black and white markets, you know. So now, man, please, what Jay-Z make, man?
All right, folks, got to go to a break. We come back, we'll chat with the great Patti Austin right here as we continue to pay tribute to Quincy Jones on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance.
We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
This is Tamala Mann.
And this is David Mann. And you're watching Roland Martin
Unfiltered.
Folks, welcome back to our tribute to Quincy Jones, who, of course, passed away Monday before last at the age of 91. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that later came out. He's since been buried. The family had a private funeral service for Quincy Jones. And, of course, with his passing happening the day before the election, there was so much focus on that. And so we wanted to definitely pay our tribute to him. Of course, we talked about James Ingram being one of the folks who worked a lot with Quincy Jones. Well, when you say James Ingram, you can't help but say Patti Austin, and she joins us right now. Patti, how you doing?
I'm fair to middling.
Well, it's always good to see you. Haven't chatted in a while. Let's talk about Q. I just, again, when you hear the words legend, iconic, GOAT, all this sort of stuff, but this man, an absolutely musical genius.
Most definitely. It's, to keep talking about Quincy's genius is a little bit redundant. That's kind of a given for anybody that had the opportunity to make music with him.
But for the people for the folks who on the receiving end, take us inside of that process. What was it like? And what made him so different and unique?
Oh, Lord. I guess the best way to explain working with Quincy, it was kind of like joining the circus. And you weren't allowed in the room unless you had equal musical expertise to his level of musical expertise, because he wasn't the kind of producer that dictated a lot about what you were going to play. It was usually in front of you, or maybe you'd hear a demo of what you were going to do. And then his sense of orchestration, his sense of chemistry played into how the music ended up. But there was never a sad moment. There was always happiness. There was always insane levels of silliness. And if you did a 4-hour session with Quincy, at least 3 hours of it would be laughing.
Well, we're actually
and 1
playing.
hour would be getting down to business.
We're actually playing a video as you're speaking, and that's literally what we see. We see the two of y'all cracking up, laughing. The two of y'all cracking up, laughing. But was that part of the secret, in that his desire was to make you as comfortable as possible in order to get the best out of you?
I don't know that it was about comfort as much as for anybody, as much as it was just his sense of silliness, I mean, I met Quincy when I was 4 years old. And by the time he passed, I was probably with him longer than even his children. His oldest daughter is about 3 years younger.
So you met at 4 years old. When was how did y'all meet?
1954.
Wow.
And he had a 2-year-old in a high chair in a basement apartment, married to a white woman in 1954 in New York City. In a basement apartment, and writing arrangements and playing trumpet. And one of the people he was writing arrangements for was a lady named Dinah Washington, who proclaimed herself to be my godmother after daring me to perform on the stage of the Apollo Theater. So I did that, and she decided that we needed to work together. And if we were going to work together, we were going to need arrangements. And the way that we were going to get those arrangements was to go and meet with this guy, this trumpet player / arranger guy that she was working with and making recordings with. So we went to his apartment. I went into his music room and sang for him. And he looked at Dinah and said, she's a midget, right? And Dinah said, no, this is my goddaughter. And he said, well, if she's your goddaughter, then she's my goddaughter too. And that's how I met Quincy. And so we've literally come up together. And the older that he got and the older that I got, when he hit his 90s and I hit my 70s, I'm 74 now, he kept saying to me, "You're catching up with me, don't get cute over there because you're catching up with me." So he was always hilarious. When I was a little girl, I just found him to be just fun, just so fun to be around. He always had this incredible, youthful, wonderful spirit, but he spent his life in the company of people like Dizzy Gillespie, who was just so silly. I can't even explain to you how silly Dizzy was. And Ray Charles and all these people, all of these musicians from that genre, from that jazz, which is where Quincy was at that particular time in his life musically. That's where he was working, let's put it that way. His musical taste was always tremendously eclectic, all over the place. He listened to everything, which was why when he became the president of Mercury Records, he knew what to do because he listened to everything. So when Bob Dylan came across his desk, he knew what to do with him. When the cast album of West Side Story came across his desk, he knew what to do with it because he had technical training, but he also had a lot of soul and a lot of funk going on around him with amazing people who pretty much invented whatever it is that we're doing now, or whatever it is we think we're doing now, is really kind of an invention of the musicians that came up at that time. And Quincy was sitting right in the middle of that pod of silliness, wonderfulness, progressiveness, an ability to improvise, an ability to sit in a room full of strangers and make magnificent music. So that was his petri dish. So by the time we got to him, he was fully formed.
Right.
And knew how to make musicians make the best music they could make. A lot of times when we were working on stuff with Michael, or when we were working on the Dude album, he would just, play the track that we were going to develop, and then he'd leave the room. And he'd come back like an hour later and go, "Okay, put some grease on this and take that down a little bit. And maybe Patti sing that again, because it was really horrible. So do that again, And whatever he had to say to you, there wasn't a lot of, now maybe you can try to, no. Limited dialogue, because you wouldn't be there unless you were, can I say this, wherever the hell we're broadcasting to?
Oh, yeah.
He was a badass.
Yeah, first of all, that's why the show's called Roland Martin Unfiltered. Trust me, I ain't got no problem cussing.
What else, Roland?
That's the only way I roll. That's the only way I roll.
I know that.
But one of the things that I think is also interesting is that, listen, for all your greatness, there can be hits and misses. I was reading a book on Aretha Franklin, and he produced an album for her that didn't do well. And some of that, they were like, he was so, and when I was in what they laid out was that he was so busy and he was doing so many things. And and when you read these stories and you watch these interviews, I mean, you sit here and go, my God, how in the world did he keep up with all of that? Because he was doing everything.
Yeah, at one point he did absolutely everything. But again, he knew how to delegate everything so that he didn't have to do everything.
Right.
And to me, that was his talent, because
he was the cosmic band leader.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. The roots are so, how that sausage got made is so important. And what was happening historically when his sausage got made, the countries that he was in where he learned his technique, in Paris, not in the States, in Paris. He comes back, he works with Ray Charles, Andy Williams, Dave Grusin, Henry Mancini. He starts doing movie scores. He starts doing TV themes. He's doing everything, but all of it within the realm of music, and all of it coming from that amazing space when Black musicians were creating a culture, not just as they've done with hip hop. We do this, this is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up at a time when this was the time of creation that everything else has sprung from. And so he got to sit in that. He got to marinate in that. and was able to shift any way the music business went because he'd seen it all, he'd played it all, he knew what it all was supposed to be, and what it, even more important, not what it was supposed to be, but what it could continue to become. Because music constantly evolves, as it should. You know, it's our gift from the maker, and he understood that. So it was just about making a joyful noise with him. And also, he loved to challenge you if he thought you were a badass too. Then you're going to be challenged. I'm going to assign you some weird stuff that no one else would even. I remember he called me up one day, was working on the score for Roots, and he wanted me to cop a sound that exists with an African tribe. It's a yodel in their alphabet. It's like A, B, C, D, and I had to sit for hours listening to recordings of that. So I could sing like about 8 bars of whatever that became underscoring. I don't even know if they finally used it in Roots. But you know, this is the kind of stuff that he would do. And it was great though, because it made you grow. You know, you didn't just sit in his garden and look cute when the sun hit you. You got to grow. You know, you better grow or else you're not there anymore. So that was the formula. I always called him the Pearl Mesta of producers. Pearl Mesta was a lady, for anybody that's not 100 years old, like me. She was a lady that gave so-called society parties in New York City when that was the thing to do. And she used to invite the garbage collector and, you know, like the highest hoity-toityest woman in America at that time, put them in a room together and let them jam. And they always did. Somehow, she always had the right chemistry of people in the studio, which was another thing that Quincy was very aware of. Who's going to work best in this environment, in this situation? He might know somebody that's going to play their booty off, but they're going to be an equal pain in the ass. They're not going to be on the session. And this was something I learned from watching him work when I became a contractor for singers. I would always keep those kinds of things in mind because I saw how he would put bands together. He learned a lot from putting his first band together. He got stranded in Europe. They had no money. He learned everything the hard way, everything. And was very good at remembering what he'd learned and not trying to do it more than twice, maybe twice, but third time wasn't going to happen. So when he gets in the studio, he's not even thinking about any of that anymore. He's already put bands together, had them break up, had them go broke, had them love him for 1 week. And then when he decided to leave that world and score movies, the guys left behind were just like, what are you doing? We're the last, we are literally the last band standing playing this genre of music. And he said, well, you're gonna be standing without me. Because I'm going to California, and the rest is history. So
you said you met him in 54. 20 years later, he has an aneurysm. And 2 brain operations.
Yeah, 2 aneurysms, actually. They went in, got the first one out, but it would be too traumatic to the body to remove them both at the same time. So they had to close him up. He had to heal. They had to cross their fingers that the second one would not burst. And, you know, that's like the first 2 bullets he ducked. He was a bullet ducking mammoth.
Right. I mean, first of all, I'm reading his account where they thought he wasn't going to make it, so they planned a memorial service, and he attends the memorial service.
Yeah. I mean, you know, listen, this last time, we had gotten to a point, at least let me speak for myself. I'd gotten to the point where I had seen him when he was really, this is it. You know, you go through this when you have seniors in your life.
Right.
My grandmother went through this. My mom went through this. I took care of my mom for 5 years. I know what all this looks like. So it's like, okay, this is it. He's just gotten out of the hospital. He's frail. I don't know if he's going to make it. I go to see him. I'm very worried about him, but
not sure what happened, folks. We're going to get Patti Austin. Hold on, Patti. Patti, you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Can
Sorry,
you hear me?
the phone blacked out there.
Yeah,
So you said
I'm sorry.
what we heard of was he was frail.
Yes, when not this time when I saw, well, actually, that's another story, but I'll get into that in a second.
Go
But
ahead.
I went to see him when he was very, very frail. And I was warned, he's very, very frail. I said, look, I know what frail looks like. I'm, I'm damn near frail myself, okay? So a mirror can tell me what frail looks like. So I went to see him, and we had this thing between us. When Quincy was working with Leslie Gore, he invited me and my parents to see the recording session. And she went on a break, and he said, I'm going to let you go in the booth and sing so you can see how you sound, so you can hear how you sound on tape. And he said, sing. And I said, well, what, I'm like maybe 11, 12 years old. What should I sing? He said, whatever you feel like singing. So of course I'm like 11, I'm 12 years old. So I sing my favorite song, which is Great Green Gobs of Greasy Grimy Gopher Guts, Mutilated Monkey Meat, Little Dirty Birdie's Feet, 1-quart jar of all-purpose porpoise pus floating in my pink lemonade, and me without a spoon. So Quincy used to sing that to me whenever he'd see me. We wouldn't see each other for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months or maybe even a year. He'd sing that to me. So I go to see him when he is bent over in frailness. And the nurse is saying, this is your goddaughter. She's here to see you. He barely lifts his head. He looks at me and he sings the entire song. Okay.
Wow.
Then I had a conversation with him about the band, about his original band. I said, Poppy, I called him Poppy. Poppy, I was listening to the old stuff the other day. God, that band was so great, because I worked with that band when I was a kid. I did a show with Quincy called Free and Easy that we rehearsed in Europe, and the plan was to bring it to Broadway, but they lost all their money. It was a mess. But anyway, so spent pretty much a year, almost a year in Europe working on this show with him. Huh?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no! So I spent almost a year on the road in Utrecht first, which was where we rehearsed at the World's Fairgrounds. Remember when they used to have World's Fairs? And the building we were rehearsing in, they were going to tear it down as soon as we finished rehearsing, which they did. And we moved the production to Paris at that point. So I had this whole background going with Quincy in those days of his working with the big band stuff. So I knew all the guys. They were all in the Free and Easy band. My dad was in the Free and Easy band. And so I talked to him about those musicians. I named 2 of them. I guess there were maybe at least 10, maybe 13 members altogether. He named every one, every last one of them, and said that was the best band I ever had. And then about 3 weeks later, I think it was last Thanksgiving, I went to the house, and he was sitting straight up in a chair like a potentate. and I went over to kiss him, and he said, baby, I like that dress. And I said, okay, you're fine. All over again. I don't know how you're fine. The last time I saw you, you were singing Great Green Gobs to me and with your head hanging. And we were all of the kids and I were standing around him going, what happened? How are you here like this? So after that one, I was like, look, he's going to be here at least another 20, 30 years. He's just going to be sitting on top of earth. It's going to be ashes, and Quincy's going to be sitting on top. So by the time that he finally did pass, I'm telling you, it's just catching up with me now, because I'm just in this state of, I just don't believe it. I had a very similar thing with Luther when he passed, that because we never saw each other regularly.
Right.
Sometimes we wouldn't see each other for a year or a year and a half. Then we'd get together for 3 days and put our pajamas on and watch all the silly stuff he wanted to see. Amos and Andy and World Wrestling. Those were Luther's favorite things to watch. And I'd watch it with him, and we'd go out to dinner and we'd talk, and we'd go to a movie and we'd talk some more, and then we wouldn't see each other forever. So I always, to this day, wait to hear from him again. And I know I'm going to go through this with Quincy even worse, because I saw the first time I laid eyes on him, I was a child. When you have that kind of a relationship with somebody, it changes all the dynamics of what you see. And we did business together, and we did father-daughter stuff together. And when my dad, my biological and beautiful, wonderful papa died, Quincy was there. He just said, I'm the understudy, I'm filling in, and he did. He helped me get through that. When my mom passed away, same thing, because our families were close, very early on when I was a child. So the relationship was very unique. And I got to see him, you know, almost die at least 20 different times. I know it's ridiculous. It's gallows humor to laugh at this, but we all got together.
Well, but he would laugh at it. I mean, he would. He would make light of it.
No, he would crack the joke first. Come on, and then it would build. You know, it would build incrementally from there with everybody in the room. But you know, it was just the vibe that was around him, and it just didn't matter how horrible it would get, and it got horrible sometimes. He just always had this reserve to pick himself up and dust himself off and start all over again and do whatever he had to do, you know.
Well, if there's a lesson for a lot of people who are watching or listening to this, or a lesson they can take away from Quincy Jones' life, is that, and again, the reason I mentioned the aneurysm is that if you look at the output of his life after.
How about that?
It's just, I think people just need to I think what happens a lot is that people go through things and they also believe that, well, I've reached a certain age and then, you know what, there's nothing more. But the reality is, all of these things that happened after he was 40, after, I mean, these things happen. And so what it means is, as long as there's still breath in your body, you can keep moving, you can keep aspiring, you can keep going, you don't know when God's gonna call you home. So you use every single ounce of talent that you've been given, and then you say, I'm gonna go grab some more. So when God comes you home, and you're like, listen, you gave me these talents, man, I'm bringing back 30 extra ones.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny you should say that, Roland, because I've started teaching master classes with a little bit of regularity. And I love doing it because I learned from the absolute best. I learned from the innovators. People like to call me an innovator, and I just go, no, I'm an imitator. You know, there's a whole bunch of ladies that came before me, and men, and musicians of every ilk that made what I'm doing possible. You know, I've ended up being more in the world of jazz than in the pop world. Because it matures better. I think after a while, if you're doing, you know, certain kinds of music at a certain age, if you notice, most pop artists, when they get a certain age, they start recording the Great American Songbook. There's a reason for it, you know, it's sophisticated, it reaches a different audience. You're trying to say different things in your life at that particular point. But I always tell my students to keep something in your back pocket, you know, which is what I learned. I learned so much stuff from Quincy about what you do when you perform. I'm jumping all over the place, but as I'm thinking of stuff, we went to the Newport Jazz Festival with Quincy and the band. Again, we being my family, mom and dad and I, Quincy, the band, and it was Newport Jazz Festival, and Ray Charles was performing at the Jazz Festival that day. And as a matter of fact, there's a scene in the Ray Charles movie where he is talking to Quincy in the
Yep, I remember it. Yep.
Okay, so we were there. We were at that. And Judy Garland was on the bill. And Quincy said to me before he got out of the bus and went to the tent, he said, and came over to me and put his fingers in my face and said, I want you to see Judy Garland. Now, I was already performing. I was doing TV, I was doing theater, I was doing everything. And he said, I want you to see. I said, I don't know, you know, I'm listening to like Led Zeppelin and and I'm listening to Motown and I'm listening to everything but what he's talking about. I said, and Judy Garland, she was pretty much a hot mess at that time. Her personal life was just a mess. And her chops were bad. And I'm like, he said, I want you to see her. And I said, okay, I'll see her. Well, I saw her and her chops were bad. And it was maybe one of the most magnificent performances I'd ever seen anybody do. Because she was a brilliant actress. And she knew how to sell whatever it was she was selling in a song, with or without a voice. she made you believe whatever she was singing about. When she did Over the Rainbow, which of course was obligatory, it's like the biggest hit she ever had in her life. So she comes out to do, I think she ended the show with Over the Rainbow, or I think it was the end of the first half of the show. And people, you could see people lifting their butts off their seats when she'd go for the somewhere. It was like, is she going to make that where? And it would not quite somewhere. She's sliding up to it, and everybody's like, come on, Judy. Come on, baby. It was like watching a horse race with a horse that wasn't quite going to make it, but they'd make it eventually. But it just didn't matter. And I'd never seen anybody perform like that before, because that really didn't have anything to do with the tradition of jazz or the way jazz female vocalists performed. They were very non-dramatic, very stoic. Lena Horne just posed and looked magnificent and sang her butt off, and that was enough. I had never seen anybody be theatrical when they sang. Or sell a song from that point of view. Quincy knew me well enough, knew that I was a drama queen, and that if I saw that, I would reinterpret that for myself. So I'm always telling my students, find those things, because if you want to have longevity, and as you said, this is in life in general, but more so, if you're a stevedore or a dancer or any of those things that, or an athlete, 45, you're not going to be doing that anymore. So you have to have other things that interest you that you're fabulous at. But you can hang in there a very long time as a comedian, doing what you do. You gremlin, you're going to be there for 100 years doing what you're doing. Singing, you can hang in there a good long time if you take care of yourself. And so I think it's always great to have something that you don't expose right away about your talents. Don't show all of your talents. Again, this was from hanging out with Quincy and these old folks in the business who knew every trick in the book. Don't go out there and if you can hit the highest note in the world, don't hit the highest note in the world in the first act. Close the second act with that highest note. Save these things as you go along. And if you plan on doing this a long time, really save up some stuff. It's like, oh yeah, well, wait a minute, I can whistle too. Whatever that may be. Whatever that may be, you hold on to that, you keep that, and you save that as a gift to yourself to keep you going and to keep your audience interested.
Well, I remember
the bottom line.
It was one year at Essence, and Janet Jackson performed the night before, and Gladys Knight was the next night. I think in Janet's show, she may have changed like 6-8 times, and so the next night, Gladys comes out, and it's a stool, it's a towel on the stool, a bottle of water, and it's the microphone stand, and Gladys says, "All right, I'm gonna sing my hits from the 50s, then I'm gonna sing my hits from the 60s, then I'm gonna sing my hits from the 70s." Then I'm gonna sing my hits from the 80s and 90s.
All right, that's enough, Gladys.
So I go backstage. I go backstage after the show, and I go speak to her. I tell her, I said, Janet changed like 6-8 times. She said, listen. She's like, She said, I'm walking that one damn dress. I ain't got time to do all that changing. She said, we're just gonna stay in there and sing. So it was just hilarious as you were talking. I just immediately thought about that. In terms
old school, man. Old school.
Speaking of that, so we were playing a clip from that 2007 conversation with the History Makers with Quincy Jones. Right. And the reason every time I see it, I laugh, because that was actually the first and the only time I met James Ingram. But I had previously met his daughter in New Orleans at Essence Fest, and we were in a restaurant. And I can't remember if I told you this story before. So I walk up to James, and so good to meet you. I tell him, hey, I met your daughter. And he was like, yeah, she told me that. And because I made her crack up laughing, because I said, please tell your dad, how is it that he never got the woman? I think only one of his songs he finally got the woman. And
he did a lot of begging, didn't he?
So that night after the Quincy Jones thing, I said, James, seriously, bro? I said, I think you got the woman one time. I said, could you at least gotten a sister 2 or 3 times? And he just bust out laughing.
I know he did.
He's like, I cannot believe he said, I cannot believe you said that. I said, bro, I was listening to like 10 or 12 of your songs once, and I was like, damn. Did he lose a woman in every song?
Just once. What what about me? I used to tease him about that title all the time. I used to imitate James's voice. Sometimes I would have to do gigs without him, and so as a spoof, I would imitate his voice. I did a pretty good imitation of James, and James used to say to me, "Patty, you do me better than I do me." And then we would just look at each other and hit the floor. It's like I don't know how to take that, man. You just you take that wherever you want to. But no, James was also again silly, another silly, wonderful, crazy person. You just, I think Quincy had some kind of magic dust that he brought with him out of the womb, and he kind of hid it maybe in his armpit and saved it up for the future, because it's really difficult. It's so difficult. This is going to sound weird. It's so difficult for me to grieve him, to have real grief about him, because the very thought of him brings back the laughter,
right,
and silliness and joy and happiness, and I have to like carve through the joy to get to the pain of the fact that I've lost him. That which I consider to be kind of selfish. I know he's in a better place. As a matter of fact, we were all talking about the folks that he's with now. I mean, there's a show going on up there.
There's a jam session.
Baby. And somebody said we need a dancer. So, we got my lady.
Judith Jameson.
Judith Jameson the other day. So now they got somebody dancing, doing 6 o'clock kicks and being fabulous. And Quincy's up there with
Quincy
Ray.
said I needed a drummer, so Roy Barnes.
Come on. And you don't need a singer yet. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong direction. Okay, you don't. Oh no. No, I mean, come on. But no, it's hard. Quincy knew a guy named Babs Gonzalez, and Babs created his own kind of language. This was during the bebop era, and he would always come and visit Quincy, and he came to visit Quincy one day, and Quincy said, "So man, how's work and everything?" He said, "Man, it's hard to get exotic when the gigs are so spasmodic." And this is the environment that Quincy was in all the time with these kind of cats, just talking silliness, making the most wonderful things out of absolutely nothing, just crafting amazing music, crafting incredible lives. It was a magnificent time to grow up in the music business, and it was a magnificent time to know him. And the other thing that I really learned from Quincy, one day an old friend of his came up to him and said, "Man, oh, you look great, wow, and how's everything going?" And Quincy talked to him a little bit. He said, "Man, you haven't changed a bit." And Quincy got really mad. He said, I haven't seen you in like 10 years and I haven't changed a bit. What an insult. And he carried that through his whole life. It didn't mean he was never going to make a mistake or do anything stupid.
Right.
But he would, in his 80s, he had a drinking issue. I'm not telling anything out of school. Watch the documentary, you'll see all about it. And when he was going to do something, no matter how destructive or constructive, you could not stop him. That was going to happen, whether you thought it was a good idea for him to do or not. If he thought it was a good idea for him to do it, he was going to do it. So getting him to stop drinking was an effort. And I was doing quite a bit of drinking at that time, my damn self. And but he just, as they say down south, he just up and stopped. He just said, "That's it. I've hit whatever my rock bottom is. I'm not doing this anymore." And he didn't. And I saw him be able, I don't know too many people in that age bracket that have that kind of an issue who can even begin to address it. Never mind, stop it. And that's what he did. And I saw him do that all the time. And biggest compliment I ever received from him was about a year ago. We were having one of our godfather conversations. And he said, "Don't you ever change." And I said, "Ooh, I want that in writing." This is from the man that says you must constantly change and evolve. He said, I said, are you telling me I'm there? I can like stop now. He said, you can stop now. I said, I want it in writing, Quincy. I never got it in writing, damn it. But no, it's to me, that was the other great talent that he had as a human being, that he was able to eventually dig himself out of whatever he had dug himself into, which
Well, it's a whole lot of that for the man folks affectionately call Q. Patti Austin, we appreciate it. Patti, where are you based?
I live in Panama. I got out 3 years ago. That's another movie. And all of us were teasing that Quincy left when he did because he was not about to see our enemy number one, public enemy number one from the president.
Right. So actually, somebody hit me on Wednesday. They like, yeah, Q left on Monday because he didn't want to see this shit. So that was literally what somebody
orchestrating.
Right. That was what somebody
stops orchestrating.
That's exactly what someone said.
Right on out the door.
Well, Patti, when you're back in the States, or if I find myself in Panama, let's be sure to connect.
Please, please, please. And I'm back and forth all the time, actually.
All right.
Nobody wants to let me retire. People, I've been doing this for 70 years. Do you hear me? Can I stop now, please?
Hey, as long as the direct deposit still goes through, I'm good. Patty Austin, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much for sharing your reflections on Quincy Jones. Thank you. Love you as well. Folks, the great Patti Austin, we appreciate her sharing those reflections. Let's go to a quick break. We come back. Kirk Whalum sent us a video sharing his thoughts, and we'll also play a couple of more clips. And the only time I got Quincy Jones on the camera, it wasn't long, but at least we made it happen. We'll show you that as well. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Gerald Albright at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hey, this is Motown recording artist Kim. You are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. That boy, he always unfiltered though. I ain't never known him to be filtered. Is there another way to experience Roland Martin than to be unfiltered? Of course he's unfiltered. Would you expect anything less? Watch what happens next.
Well, there were several people who couldn't join us live on the show, but they wanted to pay their respects to Quincy Jones. One of them is my #1 artist, my homeboy, Kirk Whalum. Here is what he had to say.
Quincy Jones, of course, was an original, but I am so privileged to get to share a memory or two with him. First of all, Q used to love to snack. So if you were in the studio with him, you had to be, have superhuman strength to not eat all them M&Ms and stuff he always had around. And he had certain combinations that he liked, like one M&M and one potato chip at the same time, all that kind of crazy. But one thing that really, it was like the first real encounter I had with him, Bob James had recommended me for a session to play with Quincy Jones. And it was like, oh my God, I was just so nervous, So I'm in there in the studio and I played my solo and, and I looked over there at him, waiting for him, he's in the control room and, he's got the talk back button. And I'm just like, oh God, please don't tell me I didn't mess this up, because he wasn't saying anything. And it felt like an hour, I'm sure it was probably like 30 seconds, but I believe he probably played this though. He knew I was nervous and everything. So he finally hit the talk back and he said, you know what was wrong with that? I'm like, oh man, my one chance, and I blew it. He said, not a damn thing. Of course, he cracked up. Like, it was funny to him. It wasn't funny to me. I was like, man, you jerking my chain. And all was well, he loved it. And he was the guy, he would hire people to do what it is he wanted you to do. If he didn't know you could do it, he wouldn't hire you. And once he hired you, he didn't really give you a whole bunch of instructions. He's like, do what you do, And so the times I worked with him after that, I was equipped, And, man, I especially loved the thing we did with Sax in the Garden, the Secret Garden remake. Anyway, I love that brother, and he was an avatar for so many of us in composition and arranging and playing. He could play that trumpet too, but he was a humanitarian. He was a great, great person.
Oh, we appreciate that, Kirk Whalum. Thank you so very much. And yeah, Sax in the Garden is one of my favorites. Music director Ray Chu also sent us this video for our Quincy Jones tribute.
Hey everybody, this is Ray Chu, and I want to pay my personal tribute to the great Quincy Jones. I met Quincy when I was very young, and before I even met him, I studied his music. I studied all of his albums, all the big band stuff, all the great stuff that he's done. And when I finally met him, it was such a great experience, and spending time with him, hearing his wonderful anecdotes and all his stories and the Quincyisms. Quincy could go, he's got like a barrel full of Quincyisms. I don't know how he remembered all that stuff, and all the history that he would recite and talk about when you got into his space. So those are my memories of him, and he was very funny too. So, hey, like everybody that's going to be talking about Quincy, you could talk about Quincy for hours and hours, talk about his movies, you could talk about all of his world productions, We the World, all the great stuff. But most of all, it's about Quincy Jones, the man. And I got to know him as the Quincy Jones, the man, and that was my honor. Thank you.
As I said earlier, we were supposed to do a one-on-one with Quincy Jones when I was at TV1, but the folks there canceled the trip. It never happened. Oh, yeah, I'm still cussing folks after that one. But 2011, we had the Washington Watch show. We were in L.A. doing a special on philanthropy and at the NBA All-Star Game. And I don't know what the red carpet was. We ended up shooting the red carpet. And guess who came rolling down? The great man himself, Quincy Jones. Here's that quick interview.
Well, last time I saw you, sir, with the History Makers, you had a hell of a time telling these wonderful stories about Chicago and being a gangster, all that good stuff.
You're Chicago, aren't you?
Actually, I've lived there for 6 years, and so now I just moved to D.C., so.
So you're a gangster, too.
Well, I'm a Texan, so we cowboy.
Same thing.
Let me ask you, this movie, it delves into a part of our history that folks aren't aware of. And even when it comes to music, you've always made it perfectly clear that people need to be aware of history, and it's not just about today.
Well, that's about anything, though. You know, if you know what's happened before, I look at it like this: if you don't have an accurate diagnosis, you cannot write a prescription. It's the same thing. If you know what happened before, how it got there, and everything else, you know, it's going to make the road easier to get where you're going.
All right, then. So that's that. First of all, I got to hit them. Was that more to that interview? It had to be. Okay, I'm going to hit my old producer, Jay. I'm like, what the hell? That cut off early. But that was, again, our chat with Quincy Jones in 2011. You heard Howard Hewitt talk about was it Howard? Was it Pat? Talking about the Netflix documentary on Quincy Jones. It was done by his daughter, Rashida. Fantastic documentary. If you have not seen it, be sure to check it out. Here is the trailer for that documentary.
I would like to have you meet one of the finest musicians that I've ever known, Mr. Quincy Jones.
Pressure's on, Quincy's here.
What a great treat. How you been, man? I've been good. My ultimate mentor and inspiration. Oh, making me sound old. You know who you are, man.
Quincy Jones, boy. I was inspired by combining hip hop and jazz, and you was the first to do it.
Quincy called me and he said, okay, well, I want to pitch your future to you.
You all know the story, right? Quincy Jones discovered me.
Don't try to do what he's done, because you get your ass killed.
Paramedics, operator 36. What is the emergency?
He is having chest pain and shortness of breath.
If you don't feel good, you got to take care of it.
I will.
I'm a survivor. My whole life has been like that.
On the south side of Chicago. In the 30s, man, and during the Depression, I wanted to be a gangster till I was 11. You want to be what you see, and that's all we ever saw.
Started playing a band, 14 years old, worked in the nightclubs. To see black men that were dignified, proud, I said, that's what I want to be. I want to be in that family. Music was the one thing that offered me my freedom.
Dad, how do you deal with your ego and your art?
You have to dream so big that you can't get an ego, because you never fulfill all those dreams. I got 6 daughters and 1 son. That's why I don't have any hair. I've seen the power of music as a tool to reach the hearts and minds of millions of people.
At each stage in this remarkable career, he's been somebody who's walked through that door before anybody else has.
You only live 26,000 days. I'm going to wear them all out.
He said, I'm going to wear them all out, and he absolutely did that. I'm going to add another couple of quick interviews here. I'm going to go to drummer Queen Cora. She literally just landed where she is. Cora, can you hear me?
I can.
All right, then. Look like you just sat down. Just real quick, thank you for joining us late. Just want to get your thoughts and reflections on the amazing, unbelievable Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones was amazing. Hang on 1 second. Quincy Jones was an amazing influence. I'm actually here in Chicago with the National Black Musicians Coalition, And his legacy still resonates with us. So being an artist, being a musician, and basically seeing yourself outside of a genre is what Quincy Jones's impact has done for me and for us. To be excellent at your craft as an instrumentalist and become a composer, arranger, producer, television, impact the television industry, the film industry, and how we hear and see music, how we see music as art, and how we see art as an impact on the lives of people around the world. I would definitely say his legacy is that for me. Just timeless and incredible. Incredible.
You talked about not being defined by one genre. You've operated in different spaces, and I think what it shows for Quincy Jones is music is universal. It is worldwide, and you don't have to be confined, if you will. That's the beauty of music. There's no such thing as boundaries in music.
Yeah, absolutely. And even business, like the business of music is something that I embraced, even as a publisher, and just going beyond the instrument to support your art, to expand your art, to have your art live light years longer than you.
Well, I know you're quite busy. You said, hey, is there a small window to join? I'm glad you hit me. Just your final thoughts about Quincy Jones.
Thank you, Roland, for having me on the show always. Quincy Jones is the quintessential expression of arts and education, and I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to meet him, grateful to share in his legacy and continue on as an artist and as a businesswoman and as an entrepreneur and creative. Quincy Jones is that, and his legacy will continue to live on.
All right, then. Queen Cora, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland.
Appreciate it. Folks, in that History Makers interview, Quincy Jones talked about how he transitioned from jazz to pop. Let's play that.
There are no greater purists in music than jazz purists. So there must have been some pushback when you moved into pop.
Honey, you think I care. When we were kids, 13 years old, in Seattle, Washington, you had to play schottisches, bar mitzvahs, strip music, rhythm and blues. You had to play everything. Ray Charles, everybody had to play it. So they acting like I changed up for a scene. You kidding? Rock and roll came out of black music. It was the music they played in the black neighborhoods. That's not new. Please. We were playing good rockin' tonight and all that stuff, listening to Pee Wee Crayton and T-Bone Walker, man, when I was 12 years old. Give me a break. Selling out.
Well,
I mean, the main thing is, so if some of these cats that are talking about that knew how to make a record to sell 50 million albums, they'd be there in a New York minute. Trust me. And not compromise your soul, because I never compromised my musicality, never.
I don't think you did, but you moved then into films. Is that something you always wanted to do? The Pawnbroker, In the Heat of the Night.
Yes.
You did amazing. In Cold Blood, you did amazing film work.
Thank you.
How did you make that transition?
I wanted to do that since I was 15 years old. I used to play hooky and go see all of these movies, and I could tell Alfred Newman's sound from 20th Century Fox, and Victor Young and Paramount. I don't know how. Stanley Wilson from RKO. I could just tell, and I'd see Benny Carter's name on one song in Snows of Kilimanjaro, or Calvin Jackson in the number, or Fletcher Henderson's brother. One tune, but never a full screen credit, And I said, I know I don't have a chance, but it is my passion to do films, because they were all Eastern European names, they didn't do that. And 15 years later, thank God, Lena Horne played it for Sidney Lumet, who was dating her daughter and finally married her. And she played my record I did for Basie, and he called me to do The Pawnbroker. And I was the happiest dude on the planet. And
television scoring is different from film scoring. You did Ironside, which I would sing it for you all, but it would date me. But I do remember how it goes. And Sanford and Son. People don't know that you wrote that.
And all Cosby's Bombs.
And all of Cosby.
Chester Kincaid, when he was the gym teacher, and his variety show and all that stuff. All of that. I did a lot of TV shows. But that's how you learn the craft, you know. You don't have an entitlement being in the record business to say I can make films and TV too. You better go learn how. It's a lifetime craft, you know.
How long did it take you to write Sanford and Son?
20 minutes. Bud Yorker came to me and he said, I'd like you to go see the film on it. I said, who's in it? He said, Red. I said, you can't put Red Fox on national TV, man. Are you crazy? Because we worked together with Billy Eckstein and Cole's Knackers at the Apollo. I used to write all Fox's entrances. And man, he was the dirtiest comic on. Mom's Mabley trained him and Slappy White. Are you kidding? I said, you got him on national television? He said, yeah. I said, I don't need to see it. I wrote it in 20 minutes. We recorded it in 20 minutes. And it was fantastic. Oh, I got the big one.
Quincy Jones also told Gwen Ifill the best advice he's ever received.
The best advice I ever got was from Nadia Boulanger in 1957. She said, your music will never be more or less than you are a human being. And so I started to work on the human being. I'm discovering a lot of things about myself, you know, and I'm trying now for the last 2 years to get all of the negative thoughts out of my body. Grudges, no more anger. It's a waste of time. And Mark Twain's words just overwhelm me. Anger is an acid which does more harm to the vessel in which it's stored than anything on which it's poured. And isn't it amazing to get to 85 to figure that out? It's pretty ridiculous, but you learn it from mistakes.
Well, that actually was from the Netflix documentary on Quincy Jones. Folks, that is it for our tribute. We appreciate everybody who has joined us. Again, Quincy Jones, an absolutely amazing man. He was always funny. So every time I would see Quincy, for some reason thought I traveled with him on a trip to China. And every time we would see each other, he would say, Roland, he said, man, did we have so much fun in the trip to China? I have no idea what the hell Quincy was talking about. Because the only time I went to China was with the National Urban League. But of course, I never corrected Quincy and just went along with it. But it was always funny. So I can only imagine what the hell happened on that trip to China. Folks, that is it for us. We'll see y'all on Monday right here on Roland Martin Unfiltered on the Black Star Network. And certainly our prayers and thoughts go out to the family of Quincy Jones. Y'all take care. Holla!